It produces a gravity wave, is similar to the gravity wave that the Earth produces. The craft phase shifts the wave. In other words, it turns the wave essentially.
Bob Lazar claimed he worked on alien spacecraft for the United States government. And here's the part that should bother you. No one has ever been able to prove he's lying. In 1989, this quiet, unassuming man sat in front of a camera and described in precise technical detail a secret facility, 9 extraterrestrial craft, and a propulsion system powered by an element that didn't officially exist yet. Investigators went digging. The government said nothing. His academic records had vanished. His story never changed. 35 years later, physicists, journalists, and government insiders are still arguing about him. Not because the evidence is overwhelming, but because it is just incomplete enough to make certainty impossible in either direction. So who is Bob Lazar really? And why does this debate refuse to die? The man behind the story, Robert Scott Lazar, was born in Coral Gables, Florida in 1959. By his own account, and those of people who knew him in his early years, he was the kind of person who couldn't leave a machine alone, always taking things apart, always needing to understand what made them work. As a young adult, he drifted toward New Mexico, where he would eventually become connected in some capacity to the Los Alamos National Laboratory, one of the most significant nuclear research facilities in the United States. He later settled in Nevada. By the time his story went public, Lazar was running a small scientific supply operation. He has never stopped doing that. Today, he operates United Nuclear, a company that sells scientific equipment, chemicals, and materials for industrial and educational use. He is not a man who sought the spotlight. He has said so himself more than once over more than 3 decades. Here's the thing that people who dismiss him never quite account for. Bob Lazar has a day job. He has always had a day job. He didn't write a book in 1989 and live off the royalty checks. He didn't build a UFO lecture circuit. He went back to work. That doesn't prove anything. But it is worth holding on to as you hear what comes next. Because what comes next is either the most important story of the 20th century or one of the most durable deceptions in modern American life. There is no middle ground. And the reason we're still arguing about it 35 years later is that no one, not investigators, not journalists, not physicists, not the US government, has been able to conclusively close the door in either direction. The job offer arrived in 1988, and accepting it required him to sign documents that he says he cannot legally discuss to this day. The job at the edge of the desert. Lazar says the contact came through Edward Teller, the physicist known as the father of the hydrogen bomb, whom Lazar claims to have encountered at Los Alamos. There is no confirmed record from Teller's side of this meeting. What Lazar says happened next is that he was told there was a position available on a highly classified project in Nevada, and that if he wanted to know what the project was, he first had to agree to conditions of secrecy he could not walk back. He agreed. He was flown by aircraft to a location south of the main Area 51 facility, the Groom Lake base operated by the U.S. Air Force, deep in the Nevada Test and Training Range. The place he was taken to, he says, was called S4, built into a mountainside near a dry lake bed called Papoose Lake. Hangar doors angled flush with the hillside, so that from the air you'd never know they were there. Here's what's important to understand about S4. It has never been confirmed by any official source. Not then, not now. The US government eventually acknowledged that Area 51 itself existed. That took until 2013, when CIA documents were declassified. But S4 remains officially nowhere. Lazar was told his job was not to design new technology. He was there to figure out technology that already existed. And the reason a team of scientists needed to figure it out was that nobody who built it had left behind an instruction manual because nobody who built it was human. 9. Discs in the desert. Stop and sit with that for a moment. Not the claim itself, the specific shape of it. Lazar didn't say he was shown one mysterious craft and left to guess. He said there were 9 of them. 9 disc-shaped vehicles stored in a series of hangar bays cut into the mountain face, with doors that opened at a slant into the hillside. He was assigned to one in particular. He called it The Sport model, a disc about 15 meters in diameter with a smooth, seamless exterior. No rivets, no welds, no seams of any kind, no exhaust ports, no wings, no conventional propulsion system visible from anywhere on the craft. The interior, he said, was cramped and oddly proportioned. The seats too small for an average adult human. The geometry of the controls unlike anything in aerospace engineering on this planet. The walls appeared to have been grown, not assembled. Now, here's the detail that doesn't get enough attention. Lazar was not describing something he glimpsed once through a doorway. He says he worked on that craft. He read briefing documents about its propulsion system. He was given materials to analyze. He had access, over multiple visits, to physical hardware that he was paid by the United States government to help understand. 9 craft, 1 assigned to him. And the technology inside it was going to require an explanation that didn't exist anywhere in mainstream science. If this is the kind of story that keeps you up at night, you're exactly who this channel is made for. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. The physics of the impossible. The propulsion system Lazar described was built around gravity, not fighting it, not working around it, but generating and directing it. The craft, he said, produced an intense, localized gravitational field that could be amplified and aimed by warping the gravitational environment around itself. The vehicle didn't push through space the way a conventional aircraft does. It essentially fell toward its destination, bending the geometry of the space between itself and wherever it was going. That's why it could hover in perfect silence. No engine, no exhaust, no combustion, just a field. That's why it could accelerate from a complete standstill to extraordinary speed without any of the inertial effects that would kill a human pilot. The craft wasn't accelerating through space, it was warping space around itself. To generate that field, Lazar said, you needed fuel. And the fuel was something that didn't exist in the known periodic table. In 1989, he called it Element 115. He described it as a dense, orange-hued material. When bombarded with protons, it produced an antimatter reaction. That reaction released energy, which was converted to power the gravity amplifiers. The element was so stable, he said, so uniquely structured at the nuclear level, that it could not be synthesized on Earth. It had to have been produced in conditions that don't exist in our solar system, which meant it had to have come from somewhere else. No such element existed officially anywhere on the periodic table in 1989. Here's where it gets genuinely strange. In 2003, 14 years after Lazar made those claims on Nevada television, a team of researchers in Russia and the United States successfully synthesized a super heavy element at atomic number 115. It was confirmed, studied, and officially named Moscovium when it was added to the periodic table in 2016. He named it 14 years before it existed in a lab. That element didn't exist yet. He named it anyway. Now, and this is the part that skeptics rightly hammer on, the Moscovium that scientists have produced is nothing like what Lazar described. It is violently unstable. The isotopes created so far have half-lives measured in milliseconds. They don't produce gravity waves. They don't serve as a fuel source for anything. There is no theoretical framework in current physics for a stable island of Moscovium with the properties Lazar claimed. So here's the question that won't go away. Where did he get the number? Did he have access to classified research into theoretical super-heavy elements? Did he make a genuinely lucky prediction? Is there something about the element that current science hasn't reached yet? That one detail right there is the argument that keeps his believers planted. But to understand why his skeptics are equally immovable, you need to look at what happened when people started trying to verify who Bob Lazar actually was. How the world found out. Before any of that investigation, there was George Knapp. In 1989, Knapp was an investigative journalist at a Las Vegas television station who had been quietly pulling at the threads around Area 51. The strange lights, the rumors, the locals who reported things in the sky that didn't match anything they'd seen before. He had been working the story for months when someone connected him with Lazar. They met off camera first. Knapp has described that initial conversation as the moment he realized he was dealing with something different. Not a crank, not a performer, not someone working an angle. Lazar spoke with the specific technical fluency of someone who would actually touch the things he was describing. He used terminology Knapp couldn't immediately verify. He was, by every read Knapp had after years of interviewing sources, either telling the truth or running the most elaborate deception Knapp had ever encountered. Knapp made the call. He put Lazar on television. In May 1989, Lazar appeared on a local Las Vegas broadcast, silhouetted, voice altered, identified only as Dennis. He spoke about his claims without revealing his identity. The response from viewers was enough that Knapp pursued the story further. By November of the same year, Bob Lazar sat in front of the camera as himself. Face visible, name given. He told the whole story, the location, the craft, the propulsion, the element. He looked the same as he does in every interview since. Unhurried, slightly tired, like a man who has told the same true thing too many times and knows that telling it one more time probably won't change anything. The broadcast traveled far beyond Las Vegas. Through VHS copies and early internet file sharing, the footage reached audiences globally. Area 51 had existed in the public imagination before, but Lazar gave it a specific story, a human face, a concrete technical architecture, the alien mythology that saturates popular culture today, the recovered craft, the back engineering programs, the gray aliens. That mythology has a specific origin point. It is those 1989 television interviews and the man who sat still and spoke in a flat, even voice about things that should have been impossible. The problem with the resume. Here's where the story hits a wall, and it's a wall that has never moved. Lazar has consistently stated that his qualifications for a job involving the most exotic physics in human history were substantial. Specifically, a master's degree in physics from MIT and a degree in electronics from Caltech. Two of the most prestigious scientific institutions in the United States. The kind of credentials that would make him exactly the right person for a reverse engineering program involving technology centuries ahead of anything on Earth. Investigators went looking for the records. No records of Robert Lazar have been located in the student archives at MIT. No records at Caltech. No professors at either institution have come forward to confirm his attendance. No classmates from the relevant period have placed him in a lecture hall or a laboratory. Stanton Friedman was not a debunker. He was a nuclear physicist who spent decades seriously investigating UFO claims and believed in principle that government secrecy around extraterrestrial contact was entirely possible. He approached the Lazar case with genuine openness. Then he started making calls. The calls came back empty. Every one of them. Friedman's conclusion, the conclusion of a man professionally invested in finding UFO claims credible, was that Lazar's academic credentials could not be verified, and that this was not a minor bookkeeping issue. It was a foundational problem. No records at either school. None. Lazar's explanation has been consistent. The government, anticipating that he might go public, systematically erased his personal and professional history, his academic records, his employment records, his paper trail. If you can't prove he went to MIT, you can't prove he worked at S4. It's a theory that is structurally impossible to disprove and structurally impossible to confirm. The employment record is similarly contested. Lazar has always said he worked as a physicist at Los Alamos National Laboratory before the S4 recruitment. Investigators did find something, a 1982 Los Alamos internal phone directory that lists a Robert Lazar. George Knapp located and publicized this. A 1982 newspaper article also mentioned Lazar in connection with a jet-powered car project and placed him at Los Alamos. But the nature of that work, physicist, contractor, technician, has never been definitively established. The laboratory has not confirmed the specific role Lazar claims to have held, and this is the part nobody talks about enough. Lazar's own demeanor when confronted with the missing records has never changed. He doesn't get defensive. He doesn't produce new documentation. He says the same thing he's always said. Look for the records. They won't be there. That's the point. What the record does show. Let's be precise, because the documented record on Bob Lazar contains things that matter to this story, and they belong in it. In 1990, approximately 1 year after his first television appearances, Lazar was convicted of a felony charge. The charge related to his involvement in the operation of a legal Nevada brothel in a capacity that violated the terms he'd agreed to. He avoided prison. He was placed on 3 years of probation. He has acknowledged this publicly. Later, his scientific supply company, United Nuclear, was found by federal authorities to have illegally sold certain restricted chemicals to customers across multiple states. Fines and penalties followed. Neither of these facts tells you whether Bob Lazar worked at S4. Neither tells you whether alien spacecraft are stored in a mountain in Nevada. What they tell you is that the person making these claims has a documented history that includes federal violations, and that anyone assessing those claims deserves to know that. Supporters argue these facts are irrelevant to the core question. Skeptics argue they're relevant to assessing the reliability of the witness. Both positions are defensible. You should hold both. What we have and what we don't. Let's inventory this precisely, because this is the only honest way to stand in front of a story like this. What exists? Over 35 years of consistent testimony with no significant changes to the core narrative. His description of element 115, named and functionally described 14 years before Moscovium, was synthesized in a laboratory. Some documentary evidence connecting him loosely to Los Alamos National Laboratory. A detailed, internally coherent account of craft design, propulsion architecture, and facility layout that has not meaningfully shifted since 1989. The 2019 documentary Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers, directed by Jeremy Corbell, which brought renewed mainstream attention to the case and featured new interviews in which Lazar appeared as he always has. Deliberate, unembellished, slightly weary. What does not exist? Any physical sample of alien material or technology? Any document, classified or otherwise, confirming that S4 exists? Any person who worked within the alleged program who has come forward to corroborate Lazar's specific account? Any verified academic records supporting his claim of degrees from MIT or Caltech? Any official government acknowledgement of anything Lazar has described? The US government has not confirmed alien spacecraft. It has not confirmed S4. It has not confirmed that Bob Lazar worked for it in any classified physics capacity. That is the complete picture. Every piece of it. The believers and the skeptics. And here's where it gets genuinely strange. Because the people who believe Bob Lazar aren't all credulous. Some of them are serious researchers. Some of them are scientists. Some of them came to his story looking to debunk it and walked away unable to fully close the case. The consistency argument is real. Over 3.5 decades, in interviews across multiple formats, with multiple journalists, in a 2019 documentary, in podcast appearances, Lazar has told the same story. He has not added new dramatic details to make it more compelling. He has not escalated the claims to match the cultural appetite for bigger revelations. He has not, as far as anyone has documented, contradicted himself on the core elements. Internal consistency over that kind of time frame, under that kind of pressure, is not nothing. The element 115 argument is also real. Not because Moscovium matches his description, it doesn't, not even close, but because naming a theoretical element at a specific atomic number 14 years before its synthesis requires an explanation. Coincidence is one. Familiarity with classified theoretical physics research is another. Believers tend toward the second. Skeptics tend toward the first. And then there's the context. Area 51's existence was officially denied for decades. Classified programs, the U-2, the SR-71, the F-117 stealth fighter, were developed in that same desert with complete secrecy. And civilians who reported strange lights in the Nevada sky were sometimes told, officially, that they had seen nothing unusual. The government's capacity and willingness to deny things that are demonstrably real is not theoretical. It is documented. It is extensive. In an environment where that kind of secrecy is proven, Lazar's account feels less like science fiction and more like a possible shape of a thing that actually happened. But the skeptics have arguments that are just as hard to dismiss. The credentials are gone, not misplaced, gone, from two of the most meticulously documented universities in the world. If the government can erase records at MIT, the government can erase anything. Which means the theory of erasure can explain anything, which means it explains nothing. That's the logical trap his explanation walks into, and there is no one else. If 9 alien craft were being reverse engineered in a facility beneath a Nevada mountainside, that operation required hundreds of people: security, maintenance, engineers, administrators. In 35 years, through multiple generations of potential whistleblowers, through the rise of the internet, through the intensification of UFO disclosure culture, through congressional UAP hearings, not one person with direct knowledge of what Lazar described has stepped forward to say, "Yes, I was there, I saw it too." The silence from inside is the thing that serious skeptics keep returning to. It does not get easier to explain with time. A government that keeps secrets and admits it. Here's what both sides tend to agree on. The government keeps enormous secrets for very long times with remarkable effectiveness. The CIA denied Area 51's existence until 2013. Pilots who flew classified aircraft from Groom Lake were told to identify their workplace as a different location entirely. The U-2 spy plane flew at altitudes so far beyond publicly known aviation capability in the 1950s that civilian UFO reports were sometimes the result of watching it catch sunlight at 70,000 feet. The F-117 was operational for years before anyone outside the program knew it existed. Each revelation followed the same arc: official denial, quiet acknowledgement, eventual declassification. And each time, the disclosed technology turned out to be more advanced than the public had imagined. This doesn't validate Lazar, but it establishes the terrain. The question is not whether the US government conceals extraordinary technology programs. It clearly does. The question is whether the specific thing Lazar described is among them. The more recent developments in UAP disclosure have shifted the ground further. The Pentagon's release of UAP footage, videos authenticated by the US Navy, depicting objects with flight characteristics that defy known aerodynamic principles, and the subsequent congressional hearings on UAPs have moved this conversation from the fringe into the legislative record. Former intelligence officials have testified about programs and recovered materials in terms that were, even a decade ago, unthinkable in an official setting. None of this confirms Bob Lazar's account, not one word of it, but it confirms that the general territory he described, classified programs, objects with extraordinary capabilities, systematic government secrecy around what it knows, is not a fantasy. It is a documented feature of how this government operates. The legacy. He didn't plan. Whatever you conclude about Bob Lazar, his cultural impact is not a matter of opinion. Before 1989, Area 51 was a subject of fringe interest among aviation enthusiasts and conspiracy researchers. After Lazar, it became a global phenomenon. The imagery that now saturates UFO culture, the recovered craft, the back engineering teams, the non-human bodies, that architecture was not there in full form before Lazar sat down in front of George Knapp's camera. It was afterward. His influence runs through documentaries, films, television series, and the entire internet culture around government secrecy and extraterrestrial disclosure. The 2019 Storm Area 51 event, which began as a Facebook joke, drew over 2 million RSVPs and briefly made international news. It is a direct descendant of the mythology that Lazar's 1989 interview seeded. The 2019 Jeremy Corbell documentary brought his story to a streaming audience that had never encountered it and triggered another full cycle of debate. And Lazar himself watched all of it happen from Michigan, where he has continued operating United Nuclear, building jet cars, living a life that looks remarkably unbothered for a man who claims to be sitting on the Most consequential secret in human history. The story that won't go away. Bob Lazar is now in his mid-60s. He gives interviews occasionally, far less often than in the years when the story was new. He has said more than once that he would prefer to be left alone. He did not seek fame. He has expressed regret that the story became public the way it did. He has never recanted, not once, not for 35 years. His story exists in a space that traditional verification cannot reach, and that is either its fatal weakness or its most unsettling feature, depending on where you stand. You cannot prove that federal records were erased. You cannot compel testimony from inside a classified program. You cannot subpoena documents from a facility the government will not acknowledge. The structure of what he is describing places it almost perfectly beyond the reach of any tool we normally use to establish truth. If you are inclined toward skepticism, that is the oldest trick in the book. Make a claim that cannot be disproven, and call the impossibility of disproof your evidence. If you are inclined to believe that governments suppress things that would change everything, then the impossibility of proof is exactly what a real whistleblower from a real black program would face. Bob Lazar is either one of the most important witnesses in modern history, or he is a man who built a story and has been living inside it for 35 years. The honest, uncomfortable, genuinely unresolved truth is that we do not know which one. The evidence does not close the case in either direction. It never has, not even close. No proof, no confirmation, just a man who looked into a camera in 1989, said something that cannot be unheard, and has not changed his story since. 35 years later, that may be the single most remarkable thing about it. If you've made it this far, you already know this channel is for you. Subscribe so you don't miss the next.